Hello everyone. Today we will watch a short retelling of the film Drift. The film begins with shots taken on an amateur camera. Four friends go to the beach together with surfboards. Amy and Dan are a couple in love. Zach and Lauren are also with them. Dan says they are his best friends and they will always be together. Suddenly the recording stops. 5 years have passed. The friends meet together again to celebrate Zach's birthday. Amy and Dan broke up. She is married to James and they have a young daughter, Sarah. Zach and Lauren meet them on the road and arrive at the marina together. Here they must find Dan and his yacht, on which they agreed to celebrate his birthday. After getting out of the car, Amy immediately puts on a life jacket. She has aquaphobia. She is terrified of water because of the trauma experienced in childhood. Friends find Dan in the cabin with his girlfriend Michelle. Everyone gathers together on the deck. Zach blows out the candles on the birthday cake. Dan thanks everyone for coming together after 5 years and raises a toast to his friends. Meanwhile, the yacht is moving away from the shore, for several miles. The friends decide to swim. Michelle is the first to jump into the water with an inflatable dolphin, followed by Zach, Lauren and James. Amy goes to the cabin to feed Sarah. When she returns to the deck, Dan decides to play a joke. He takes her in his arms and, despite her desperate cries, jumps overboard. Amy goes into shock. We see a summary of the story from her childhood, when her father suddenly drowned while swimming. Hence her fear of water. Amy needs to be taken on board urgently, but then everyone notices that the yacht has not lowered the ladder. When it becomes clear that just jumping to the side will not work, Michelle begins to panic. She is tired and cold. It seems to her that someone is biting her legs. Dan tries to calm her down, but in vain. She just lies down on the water and begins to pray furiously. Suddenly, friends hear a mobile phone ringing. The sound comes from the deck. On the edge, at the very side, is Zach's jacket, and in his pocket is a phone. Zach jumps up and grabs the sleeve of his jacket, pulling it into the water. The phone gets wet. Everyone just has time to hear the voice of Zach's sister. Then the phone turns off. Zach throws him into the water in desperation. A boat passes by. Friends start shouting and waving their arms. But the people on deck don't understand them, but just laugh and wave their hands in response. The vessel is being removed. After some time, Dan comes up with the idea to make a rope out of clothes and throw it on board. Friends take off everything and tie it together. In the end, Dan manages to hook the rope to the iron railing on board. He rises, but the rope does not hold, and breaks. James decides to check if it is possible to climb into the yacht from the bottom side. He takes a knife, puts on a mask and dives under the court. Having descended to a great depth, James begins to suffocate and in a panic quickly floats up, but hits the head of one yacht. He has a traumatic brain injury. Blood is flowing from his ears and nose. Amy sees that her husband is in trouble and shouts that he needs to go to the hospital. Friends understand that things are really bad. Zach takes the knife from James and swims to the yacht. He tries to stick the point of the knife into the slot on the board, but Dan begins to resent. An altercation begins between the men, and Dan accidentally stabs Zach in the side. Michelle is afraid that the blood will attract sharks and swims away. When friends remember her, she is no longer on the surface of the water. Michelle drowns and becomes the first victim. After a while, Zach dies from blood loss. James is also very bad. He constantly says that he has a bad headache and is cold. Lauren decides to swim for help. She doesn't know which way to move and just swims away at random. James begins to scold Dan and blame him for everything. When Amy tries to calm him down, he sees a hidden meaning in her words and thinks that she is protecting Dan because of an old love and his money. And then Dan admits that it's not his yacht. He just took it secretly from his boss. He tells how he cheated on girls like Michelle by pretending to be a rich guy. But in fact, he's just a nobody, an errand boy. This explanation shocks Amy. A storm starts at night, with rain and strong winds. James is dying. Dan and Amy are left alone. Dan tries to dive in a mask to find a knife, but there's no point in it. Suddenly he has a cramp. Amy rushes to Dan's aid, takes off her vest and hands it to him. Friends are holding on to the water with the last of their strength. Dan scolds himself in despair and screams. He knocks the glass out of his swimming goggles, and then an idea comes to him. He swims to the side of the yacht, inserts the glass into the slot and calls Amy. She climbs onto his shoulders, then onto the hands holding the glass, pulls herself up and climbs out onto the deck. First of all, she presses the button and lowers the ladder to Dan, then lies down to her little daughter. After feeding Sarah, Amy goes on deck and realizes that Dan is nowhere to be found. Looking overboard, she sees him sailing away from the yacht. She realizes that Dan has decided to commit suicide. Having overcome her fear of water, the woman rushes overboard. She manages to catch Dan. She sees footage from the past. Then, as a child, she also tried to pull her drowned father to the surface. In the last frames, you can see how an empty yacht is standing in the middle of the open sea. A fishing boat sails up to her, a man looks at the vessel from which the crying of a child can be heard. And then we see Amy standing on the deck, and Dan lying at her feet. The woman was able to cope with her fear and corrected the mistake of the past. She saved someone she once loved. That's how this movie ends. Thank you for watching. If you liked the retelling, put likes and subscribe. Soon there will be a lot of videos on the channel. See you later.